You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my somewhat awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. I'm super excited about today's episode. It's a friend of mine. Ivan, please go ahead and introduce my buddy.
I'm very excited to introduce Courtney Campbell. We finally found a friend that Shawn has. So on the business side, Courtney is a veterinary surgeon at VetSurge. He is the host of the podcast Anything Possible. He's a chief creative director at Vet Candy. He did his DVM degree at University of Tuskegee, Bachelor of Science in Pre-Veterinary Studies from the University of Delaware. And on the personal side of things, he was a bodybuilding competitor for 4 years. Whoa. He has acted in 6 theater productions. Courtney, I'm super excited, heard a lot about you. I want to know today your story. We're talking about innovation in being veterinarian and having a diverse career and different paths and what you can do with it. Welcome.
Well, listen, I that's a tremendous introduction. Shout out to all the bodybuilders out there. I definitely was a physique competitor. They probably look at us as little skinny guys, but yeah, that's something I gotta get back into. Thank you for bringing that up because I'm not in the best shape right now. But it's wonderful to join you guys. And listen, it's a tremendous topic to talk about because when I had the opportunity and the privilege to listen to your other podcasts and your other guests and just really great thinkers out there, really tremendous innovators out there creating software and contributing and advancing to the profession. And one thing I wanted to talk about today is just how to have an innovative mindset when it comes to your career. When it comes to what you're doing within veterinary medicine. Because unfortunately, when you look at some of these well-being studies and these workplace stress and anxiety studies, particularly within veterinary medicine, there's a huge disparity. Those who are above the age of 50, when asked, would you do this again? Would you become a veterinarian again? The number was close to 50% or a little bit under. And those who are interested in that well-being study, we can certainly get that to you. But those who were under the age of 50, those who were in the age of 40 or 30, approximately 25% of them said they would do it all over again, do veterinary medicine all over again. And so it's challenging because that basically means that potentially 75% of young veterinarians are out there thinking, hey, man, I wouldn't do this again. I think that the mentality will change. I think that will change. However, if you are looking for another career, if you are looking to be innovative with your career, then I think it's important to talk about that. And one particular aspect of the career that I found myself in is veterinary journalism. And if you asked me when I was in vet school, hey, Courtney, you are going to be a veterinary journalist or you're going to be in media, I would have laughed. I would have completely laughed. I was so focused on being a veterinary radiologist. At the time, I had a strong interest in positron emission tomography and diagnostic imaging. And I'd worked with some of the best radiologists in the nation in Maitland, Florida, and then throughout vet school. And I was just so focused on that. In fact, I had even secured an advanced position in internships that was going to lead into a residency. And so that was my focus. And then that was during the time of the economic collapse and the funding for that position actually fell out. And although I was devastated, that turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. So that's probably my first message as far as innovative mindset. If you experience disappointment in life, if you experience a huge hurdle or tribulation, understand that although it may feel depressing at the moment, it could turn out to be a very fortunate situation for you, and it could result in a new awakening, or it could be an illuminating experience. So that's my first message. But then second is think outside the box. And that landed me in a career in media because I found myself really focused on media at a very early age.
That's awesome. And that resonated with me so much. You actually said about radiology. That's what I wanted to do. When I was in the vet school, I was scared of radiology. Right. And then I actually focused on it. And we built a website where I was kind of consulting with other students on radiology. But that kind of progressed me further in it. And I started to love it instead of being afraid of it. Really wanted to do radiology. Also had a job lined up that would lead me to doing the residency. and also fell through. And I turned around and built a diagnostic lab. It was a weird experience. But there's so much of this burnout, and I would like to hear about the study. Maybe you can give me the notes actually after. And I will do a shout out for myself as well, because I'm halfway through my dissertation and I am doing a study on burnout. So we're going to deploy actually a huge study across the nation. I'm going to use a bunch of marketing tools to do it. And but I want to know how bad the industry is burned out. We're gonna try to measure that. But so innovating with your career, the one key thing that I heard is being devastated, and I found a different path. And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs actually go through some life event that turns them around and makes them stronger and leads them into a different direction. So where did you go after that? How did you progress into the journalism in veterinary medicine?
Yeah, it's almost like a tipping point, right? And so, interestingly enough, I had just and again, you give a shout out to yourself. I didn't know we can give personal shout outs here, so I will say we just. I'm kidding, of course. I just released an episode on Anything Possible, my podcast on positive psychology and workplace well-being, and so anybody who's interested in that, of course, can check out that particular episode of just how do we recognize our inherent gifts in each other, and it's something I really try to prevent is something called normalization of gifts, where you have just normal gifts and normal talents. And you'll find that people will say, oh, that's normal. Everybody can do that. And so, again, I applaud the fact that you are halfway through your dissertation and are doing outstanding work, trying to figure out the extent of burnout. It's a very real thing. And I thank you for that. I wanted to say, as far as my tipping point, I used to be hanging out with my mom and my family, at home watching a program on CBS called The Doctors. And I remember watching that show with my mom and just, we would just keep it on in the background and we'd be talking and hanging out. And it was more to keep track of time because you're not looking at a clock. But when The Doctors would come on, my mom was so interested in it. And she would just love the medical information. And I get it because that show was super popular at the time. And because I was biased towards veterinarians, I would look at that show and I'd say, well, that's cool, those MDs, but how cool would it be if it was a show with a panel of veterinarians, instead? And they were talking about veterinary medicine. So I looked at that show and fast forward 5 years, we were talking about something innovative in the world of orthopedics, medical orthopedics, and it was about giving Botox in dogs. Right. What we were doing, and there's a couple studies on this, and unfortunately it fell out of favor because of some complications. But the study had looked at using botulism toxin as an intra-articular injection, meaning giving an injection in the knee of dogs of botulism toxin who had end-stage osteoarthritis for prolonged pain relief. Okay. And obviously you have to be super careful if you're giving Botox in the joints of dogs, right? And at the time that was considered, really innovative. But in LA, if you say the word Botox, then all media just comes running, right? So they were like, Botox in dogs? Wow. And so at that moment, the Doctor's TV show, this is 5 years after I'd been watching with my mom, he said, hey, we'd like to talk to you and your hospital, because there was obviously, the hospital was led by another doctor at the time, about the use of Botox in dogs. And of course, we had to tamp down any sort of discussions about cosmetic surgery in animals or anything and say, this is strictly for medical purposes. And then after I spoke with them, they said, hey, would you mind coming in studio and talking about it? And I did that. And then after that one time, that led into 25 episodes, or something of me, or 25 appearances. And then after that, maybe fast forward another 2 years, they had created a show like The Doctors, but a panel of hosts, and except this time it was going to be veterinarians. So exactly the show that I had pictured in the living room with my mom, that show was being created. And guess who they called to ask to host it? Me. And it was called Pet Talk, and it was on Nat Geo Wild, and it was an incredible experience being, the first primetime talk show strictly about animals. There's been a litany of reality shows with veterinarians, and I think reality is an awesome platform. But talk allows you to cover a broad swath of subjects very quickly and in bite-sized chunks that owners and animal lovers can escape with. So I would just say this, and when it comes to innovation, when it comes to, as you mentioned implicitly, a tipping point, so to speak, I just think it's so important to understand that you may not recognize those tipping points at the time, but I I fell into veterinary media and journalism because I had a strong passion for it. I'm still a news junkie right now, and fortunately, I created my own news show in combination with Vet Candy called Vet Candy Watch. And it just basically covers breaking news stories, clinical updates, and just pet health related news, because I think that there's an endless need for information. I think that information is power. And in a society where information is power, we can't afford to be powerless. So I just think it comes from passion, having a really deep passion towards what is it that you love doing. There are so many people right now, and you and I both know them. There's so many people out there sitting at their desk, super talented at something. I'm horrible at singing, and you guys would die if you heard me sing. So I don't do that, right? I can't really draw to save my life. It's mainly stick figures. So I don't really do that either. And so I try to do the things now in my life that I feel like I have some level of talent at, or some deep passion towards. And I just hope that everybody who's listening to us right now thinks about, what are your inherent gifts? What are your natural gifts in life? Because if you can do something regarding that, your passions and your gifts, both of you are tremendous entrepreneurs and creators, and you use your passion and your gifts to create something beautiful to advance the profession. And I find both of you really inspirational.
So, Courtney, I want to take you back to that moment when you had this devastation. And so there's an author that I really, really love. His name is Napoleon Hill. He's been dead a long time now. And he wrote this book called Think and Grow Rich. And so he has this concept that the seed of adversity brings with it an equal or greater opportunity. So you're going down this road towards radiology. It gets, shit canned, for lack of a better term, nothing you can do. And then you find journalism. And then we fast forward to 2020, and you're at Petco receiving the annual Excellent in Journalism Award, having a TV show, doing all of these things, and just really riffing on this new dream that came out of this, this seed of adversity. And I think it's just absolutely incredible. Have you seen that happen to you yourself again?
I have had lots of adversity in my life, lots of adversity. And I do think that you're so correct. There are so many instances where you have heard about individuals who are successful, who have experienced adversity. In fact, some people believe it's a prerequisite for success, is to have a moment of profound disappointment or profound failure, which acts as a catalyst for furthering your career. And one particular story comes to mind, that book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. I believe it was turned down by 43 publishers at the time before it became a national bestseller. And in my life, have I had a situation like that besides radiology? Absolutely. I've had a lot of projects that I have attempted to do, took a step outside of my comfort zone, and they didn't work out, or they didn't do well. I was super disappointed when Pet Talk wasn't renewed. I was super disappointed, to go back further, like you said, when the radiology internship residency didn't work out. I had applied for surgical residencies a total of 3 times, and none of them worked out until I finally secured one. And so the surgical board exam was a beast. It took me at least twice to 3 times to pass that. So each time it felt like I had lost a part of my soul. Each time I got that result from the surgical board exam saying, hey, you did not pass all the sections, it felt like a part of me had died. And you think, well, he's speaking in hyperbole. No, because when it comes to that exam, when it comes to board certification and specialty certification, everybody who goes that path is giving a huge part of their lives. Time, money, resources, their brain power, being cloistered like a nun in a room, for 9-12 weeks studying nonstop. All of those experiences, when you arrive to that exam, anxieties are high, you're nervous, you're stressed, you're hoping it will all work out. Then you take the test, and then you wait 8 weeks to find out, was it enough? Did I do enough? And when you get that result in the email saying, we regret to inform you, you don't even read the rest of the email. The rest of the words are just blurred, because all you see is we regret to inform you. And part of you dies. But with that trough, with that emotional sort of trough and valley, there is a mountain. Because once you pass that exam, that low, you certainly experience an equivalent high. So when you see that, congratulations. We're happy to announce that you have successfully completed the requirements for, and it's all pedantic language, but you know what I mean. It's tremendous. So anybody who, like you said, you mentioned a tipping point or those things in life that change you. Anybody who's experiencing that emotional trough, that valley, just know there will be an equivalent high in life, and it'll feel just as good, I hope.
That's incredible. So powerful. I have to do this. Shawn, I need to hear your devastated moment and how lightheaded you shit. Tell us right now.
I want to hear it too.
Oh, thanks, Ivan. So I've got it right off the bat. So the year is 2004. I'm running a company. It's called Student Computers. I started it out of university. We had a great idea to get into the video rental business because Blockbuster was a thing, Netflix didn't exist. And so we took a bunch of money that we didn't have, about $500,000, opened a couple of video stores, worked 7 days a week for over a year, 12 hours a day, trying to run two companies, and almost lost them both. Lost one. And it was devastating, working as hard as I could, as hard as I ever did. And just there was nothing we could do. The business model was flawed. And then this is the thing that I hate about failure is you always figure out the way out of the failure, oftentimes post-failure, because you get in that stinking thinking, you can't get out of it. And this is really, Courtney, this is why we had such a fast friendship when we first met, is like we had our call. How you doing? I said, I'm great. I said, how are you doing? I'm fantastic. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Why is he fantastic? And then, and then we became like fast friends. And I think that this illustrates a really interesting point, which is you've got to watch who you surround yourself with, because you basically take on the thought of the people you're around. And so when I hang out with people like Ivan, as much shit as I give you, Ivan, or Courtney, we don't know each other well enough for me to give you shit yet, Courtney, but it's coming. There's this thing that you kind of feed off of each other, and you just kind of go at it. So there's your answer, Ivan. I had it prepared.
Okay, Ivan, you can't do that. You can't put us both on the spot. I'll give you a little leeway. If you want to give the Cliff Notes version, you can. But we really want to hear, what was your tipping point?
I mentioned that after I graduated from basically second vet school, which was in Canada, because the first one I did in Ukraine, I had this job lined up in BC, British Columbia, and Canada, and I wanted to do radiology there. And then I flew to Russia to do a surgical experience for 3 weeks. And I wanted to order histopathology on a sample, and they said, we don't have a histo lab. And I was like, whoa, it's Moscow. You don't have a histo lab. So how do you do that? They said, well, we can send it to a human lab, and it takes about 6 weeks to get it back. So I flew back and basically told that in the lab in the Atlantic Vet College. That's where I graduated from. And they said, do you want to build a lab in Russia? And I said, you're out of your mind. No. And then came back 2 hours later. I said, I'm doing it. So I flew to Russia, built the first diagnostic lab in Russia. And then 9 months into it, the guy who was supposed to be doing sales, because I was a big doctor, I'm not doing sales, I'm a scientist. And he fell through, so he couldn't do it. And then the president of the company flew out, said, we're pulling the plug, the project is over. And I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to sell this, and I build the lab, now I can sell it. So I signed up 75% of Moscow, which is 14 million people city, within the next 6 months, and the revenue never covered the operations. So because I was getting my paycheck as a Canadian doctor, it was way higher than any paycheck in Russia. So it was a corporate decision to pull me out of that. So I took an extra mile, and I wanted to work as a vet. And I said, I'll work for free. We need to build this project. And someone wanted my seat as a CEO in Russia, or whatever it was, general manager of Russian division. And they told the board that I was running a business under, anyway, they just wrote an email that didn't look good. So I was fired in front of the entire lab. They called, and it was a normal call, and they're like, "Hey, can you invite everybody?" They were people that I hired. They were my friends. I built a whole thing, first lab in Russia, and felt like great accomplishment. And they said, "Can you call everybody into your office?" Everybody came into my office. I put them on the speakerphone. They said, "Ivan is fired today, and he is leaving. You're taking his keys, car keys, locking the doors behind, changing the locks, and taking his computer." And I walked out. That was a
The
blow.
lab that you made, you sold, you hired all the people, they all said goodbye.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's fair to say you were completely blindsided by this. Like you didn't know it was coming.
Oh yeah, it was like hit by a bus. It was like I don't want to say it on air, but not many people listen to us. I think I did cry when I left. So it was terrible.
He said it's
really
okay
bad.
for me to admit that I cried because nobody's listening. That is not a good thing. No, I will say this, one thing that is common, the common motif that I hear from all three of us, and like I said, you guys are life goals, so I'm not even trying to put myself on your same level, but the motif is hard work. You had worked so hard to achieve a certain goal, and it still ended up in disappointment. It still ended up in disappointment. But because you were so passionate towards it, that didn't derail you. And so, listen, that's the reality. Not everything is Pollyanna, roses and fairies and everything. Sometimes you're going to work really, really hard at something, and it still won't work out. And so these notions of, hey, listen, you're going to work really hard and you can do anything in life as long as you work hard. Yeah, you can, but not every project is going to work out. And I think that's a really important, hard and cold dose of reality for all of us who are striving to achieve something great.
Yeah. Well, Courtney, so powerful, so inspiring. A vet celebrity, a surgeon, I don't know, everything that you could dream about. You keep complimenting us, but it's incredible to meet you, and I'm really happy, Shawn, that you brought your the only friend that you have. So, but we have to wrap it up. I could probably talk to you for hours. Hopefully, we'll meet at the next conference when they will be live or something like that. But we do ask these two questions. Is there anything that inspired you recently? A TED Talk, a book, anything that you can recommend our listeners to watch, listen, or read?
I was fascinated recently by a book called Wildhood. And Wildhood is just a book that looks at animals, wild animals, a variety of species through the prism of adolescence. Okay, do other species have an adolescence? And the commonalities and similarities are absolutely fascinating, just in terms of how adolescent humans experiment, how adolescent penguins, otters, cheetahs, hyenas, they all go through this period of doing thrill-seeking behavior, not smart behavior, learning with their social status, how to find mates, everything that you and I experienced as an awkward teenage. Well, you guys weren't awkward, but I was really awkward in high school. You find a comfort in this book because you realize we are truly a planetary tribe and all the species are really similar. And then I'm kind of late to the game on this TED Talk from Melanie Bowden and why she became a veterinarian. I know that a lot of people have heard it. I'm sure she has millions of views, but I had always put it on my watch list and then just never got around to it. But then recently I did. I think that TED Talk is really illuminating because it gets to the heart of why veterinarians experience burnout. It gets to the heart of our job. She describes it in this granularity and this detail as to if you're not within the profession, you listen to that and you go, my goodness, is that what veterinary medicine is like? And the truth is, I think her version is a little bit sanitized. I think she pulled back a little bit from the rigors of an everyday veterinarian. So to just complete the circle, to put the period at the end of the sentence, when we talk about workplace culture, work-life balance, well-being, mental health, both in terms of working hard, knowing that at some point you may experience loss, but don't be discouraged. Continue to strive forward and take a listen to that TED Talk. That was particularly inspiring. And I hope I get to read your dissertation, Ivan, when it's done.
Nice. One last thing, Courtney, we love other innovators, people like you, people that you've run across. Who's somebody you'd recommend, or one guy or gal that you think we must have on the show?
Wow. It's these Uncompensated shout outs. I don't know if I can do these. No, I'm kidding. There's so many people who are innovative and just great. One person that comes to mind is Dr. Jill Lopez. Dr. Jill Lopez started a multimedia platform to sort of innovate and how to particularly educate veterinarians and vet students while we are social distancing. Let me be clear about something. I truly believe this COVID era will fundamentally change the way we learn going forward. Inviting people from all across the world into one crowded room, packed shoulder to shoulder, may be a thing of the past. I'm not sure. So if that is the case, I hope I'm kind of wrong about that. But if that is the case, where we will not be doing that in the same setting, then we have to think about innovative ways to teach each other. And she definitely comes to mind.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryiinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.